The sky above the ruined colony was heavy with smoke, drifted through the air like gray snow among the broken houses and burned fields. An alien woman lay on the hard ground. She was a widow. Her mate had died in the last raid. Her children had vanished in the chaos. Now she was alone, starving, and too weak to move. Her body trembled every time she tried to sit up. Her stomach growled, but there was no food left. Flies buzzed around her face, crawling on her dry skin. She tried to push them away, but her hands were too weak. Her breath came slow, her chest rising and falling as if every breath might be her last. Passersby from her own kind glanced at her, but turned away quickly. Some muttered that she was cursed. Others whispered that she was already as good as dead. Nobody wanted to help a starving widow who had nothing to give back, so they let her rot by the side of the ruined road. The widow's eyes, once full of light, now stared at the ground without hope. Her lips cracked from thirst, her body shaking. From hunger, she whispered to herself in a faint voice, "Why am I still alive? Better if I had gone with them." Her voice broke as she remembered her family. The sun was falling, and the shadows grew longer. Insects gathered around her body, waiting. Her ears buzzed with their sound. The world around her became blurry, and her mind drifted between sleep and death. Then, through the haze, she heard footsteps. At first, she thought it was another scavenger come to laugh at her, but the sound was different, heavy. Strong, steady. She forced her eyes to open wider. What she saw made her heart jump in fear. It was a human, tall, scarred, carrying a dusty bag on his back. His boots crunched on the broken stones as he walked closer. The widow felt her weak breath catch in her throat. Her people had always told stories of humans dangerous, cold, selfish. Many said humans could not be trusted. And now one was standing over her. The human stopped and looked down at her. His eyes studied her thin frame, the flies around her, the way she lay too weak to rise. For a moment, there was silence. The widow wanted to scream, to crawl away, but she could not. Her fear mixed with shame. Would this human laugh at her like the others? Would he finish what death had already started? The man crouched down, resting his bag on the ground. His face was tired, but his eyes were sharp. He did not look at her with disgust, but with something else, something she did not understand. The widow's heart raced, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Go. Leave me. I am nothing." The human did not move away. Instead, he slowly opened his bag. The sound of fabric rustling made her hold her breath. Was he pulling out a weapon? Was this the end? Her eyes followed his hand carefully. From the bag he took out a small pack, old and worn when he tore it open. A smell spread through the air, a smell she had not known for many days. Food. Her heart leaped, her dry throat aching. The human held the food in his hand and looked at it for a long time. The widow noticed his face. He looked hungry too. His cheeks were hollow, his arms thinner than a soldier's should be. This was not a man with plenty. This was a man with only one meal left. He sat on the ground beside her, staring at the food. In silence, the widow closed her eyes, waiting for him to eat. But instead, she felt his hand push the meal toward her. Her eyes shot open in disbelief. He was offering it to her. Her weak voice cracked. "Why? You will starve." The human only shook his head. His voice was low and calm. "You need it more." Her fingers shook as she reached out. She touched the package like it was something holy. Tears blurred her eyes as she brought the food to her mouth. She ate slowly, carefully, almost not believing it was real. Every bite sent strength back into her weak body. Every bite told her she was not forgotten, not worthless, not yet dead. The human watched in silence, his face unreadable. The widow swallowed and finally whispered, "You gave me her last meal. Why?" The human looked at her with steady eyes. His answer was simple. No one deserves to die alone. The widow froze. Her heart shook as if those words carried more weight than food itself. Her people had abandoned her, but this stranger, this human, had chosen to give when he had nothing left. In the distance, the sound of footsteps echoed. Dark shapes were moving near the ruins. Scavengers, raiders, maybe worse. The human stood, placing himself in front of her. The widow felt a chill run through her. This was not the end of her. Suffering, something more dangerous was coming. The sound of footsteps echoed closer through the ruins. The widow's heart pounded as she tried to sit up, but her body was still too weak. She looked at the human who had just given her food. He stood tall, his back to her. Eyes watching the shadows ahead, his jaw was set, his hand resting near the handle of a small knife on his belt. The scavengers appeared, first 3 of them, thin but dangerous. Their eyes glowed with greed as they saw the human and the weak. Alien woman. One of them laughed, showing broken teeth. Look at this. A human feeding a dying widow. What a waste. Another spat on the ground. Better to take what you have and leave her to rot. The human did not move. He only said in a firm, steady voice, "She is not yours. Walk away." The scavengers exchanged glances and grinned. They were used to fear, but this human showed none. One of them stepped forward, holding a crude weapon. "What will you do if we don't?" "You have nothing, human." The widow's breath caught. She expected the human to fight, but instead, he bent down slowly and reached into his bag again. Her eyes widened inside. There was nothing else but a single flask of water. The human took it out and placed it beside her. Then he stood again. Facing the scavengers with empty hands, the raiders laughed harder now. "You give away food? Now water too? Are you trying to kill yourself?" The widow felt her throat ache. Why was this human giving everything when he himself was weak? Did he not fear death? The scavengers grew bolder, moving closer, but then, as if bored, they finally spat in the dust and walked away. "Not worth the trouble. Let the fool starve with his pet," one muttered. Their laughter faded into the smoke. The human's shoulders relaxed, but only slightly. He turned back to the widow. Kneeling beside her once more, "You must drink," he said simply, pushing the flask toward her. The widow stared at it, then at him. "You gave me your food, now your water. Why?" Her voice shook with confusion. No one, not even her own kind, had shown her such mercy. And yet this human, this stranger, gave without hesitation. The man sat down beside her, his back against a broken wall. For a long time, he said nothing. The widow watched his face lined with scars, hardened by travel and war. Finally, he spoke. His voice quiet but heavy. "I once saw a child die of hunger because nobody shared. Not again." The widow's chest tightened. She looked at him with new eyes. He was not just a traveler, not just a man. He carried pain too. Pain hidden deep inside. Her hands trembled as she held the flask. Sipping the water slowly, each drop cooled her throat. Each drop brought life back to her. The night grew colder as stars began to pierce the smoky sky. The human built a small fire from broken wood. He sat close to it, but he gave the warmer spot to her. She wrapped her thin arms around herself, staring at the flames. The crackle of fire filled the silence. Finally, she whispered, "My people said humans only take, that you never give. Why are you different?" The man poked the fire with a stick, his face hidden in the glow. "Not all humans are the same. Just as not all of your people are cruel," he replied. His eyes lifted, catching hers. "We have a choice, always, hey. Choice, even when it costs us." The widow felt a strange warmth inside her chest. No one had spoken to her like this since her husband died. She lowered her gaze. her voice almost too soft to hear. "I do not even know your name." The human gave a small smile, though it did not reach his tired eyes. "Call me Elias." The name hung in the air like a promise. The widow whispered her own name in return. Her voice cracked as she spoke it, for it had been so long since she had said it to anyone. The sound of her name in the night felt like life itself. They sat in silence for a while. The fire burned. Lo, the night deepened, but inside her heart, something small and fragile began to grow. Hope, still, fear lingered at the edges of her mind. Her people had left her, her family was gone, but this human, he was giving her life with every choice he made, and she could not understand why. She stared at him as he sat guard through the night, his hand resting on his knife, his eyes never closing, always watching the darkness. He had nothing left but still chose to protect. The widow's thoughts twisted with questions. Would he stay? Would he leave her when morning came? Or would danger return before either of them had a chance to decide? As the stars wheeled above, the widow closed her eyes at last. For the first time in many days, she felt safe enough to sleep. But her dreams were uneasy, filled with the sound of boots, weapons, and fire. When she woke, she knew something was changing. Her fate was no longer only hers. It was tied to the human who had given everything. And deep in the ruins, hidden eyes were already watching them both. The first light of dawn touched the ruined colony. The smoke had thinned, but the ground was still black with ash. The widow stirred awake, her weak body shivering in the cold morning air. Beside her, Elias, the human, still sat with his back against the wall, his knife in hand, his eyes red from a sleepless night. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream. The food, the water, the fire, his words. But when she turned her head, the empty package lay near her, and the flask rested by her side. It had been real. She was still alive because of him, her stomach felt a little stronger now, her head clearer when she tried to push herself up. Her arms no longer failed her completely. Her body shook. But she managed to sit without falling. The small spark of life returned. She looked at Elias with quiet wonder. "You stayed all night," she whispered. Elias did not look at her. His eyes remained on the horizon. "Someone had to keep watch," he said calmly. His voice was flat, but there was weight in it. The widow lowered her gaze, her heart heavy with both gratitude and guilt. No one had ever given her so much, not even at the cost of their own comfort. And yet, here was a stranger, a human, who gave when he had nothing left. The silence stretched, broken only by the caw of a distant bird. Finally, she asked the question that had haunted her since yesterday. "Why risk yourself for me?" "I am no one." Elisa's eyes softened just a little. "You are alive. That is reason enough." The words struck her deeply. Her own people had looked at her and seen nothing but a burden. This human looked at her and still found worth, a warmth, spread through her chest, fragile but real. It was like a small flame in a dark room. But before she could say more, a sound drifted across the ruins' footsteps again. This time, slower, heavier, more deliberate. Elias rose to his feet at once. Scanning the broken street, the widow felt her heart pound in fear. More scavengers. She asked in a trembling voice. Elias shook his head. "No." Soldiers, from the smoke. 3 figures emerged, armed and armored. They were not raiders this time, but enforcers from a local warlord. Their eyes landed on the pair immediately. One of them sneered, a human and a starving widow. How touching. Elias stepped forward, placing himself between the soldiers and the widow. His hand gripped his knife, though it was a small weapon compared to their rifles, the widow's. Breath caught. He could not fight them. He would die. Her body screamed at her to run, but she could not leave him, not after all he had done. One of the soldiers laughed cruelly. "You must be desperate, human. giving your last food to trash. Another stepped closer, raising his weapon lazily. Move aside. We have no use for her. The warlord doesn't feed broken widows. The widow's chest tightened. She remembered the voices of her people. The whispers, the cruel looks. Again and again, she had been told she was nothing, but now? Someone was standing against that. Someone who believed she was still worth protecting. Elias's voice was calm but unshaken. She stays with me. The soldiers exchanged amused glances. Then you can die with her. One spat. The widow's heart froze. This was madness, one man against 3 armed soldiers. But Elias did not step back. He planted his feet firmly in the ash, ready to fight. The widow's throat burned with helplessness. Her body was still weak to stand and fight, but her mind was no longer empty. Something inside her refused to stay silent. She forced herself to her knees, crawling forward until her hand touched Elias's boot. Her voice cracked but carried weight. No, please, don't. The soldiers laughed at the sight of her begging, but Elias glanced down at her. And in his eyes, she saw not annoyance, not weakness, but resolve. His lips pressed into a thin line. Stay behind me, he said. The soldiers raised their rifles. The widow's heart screamed. And in that moment, something changed inside her, for the first time since her family died. She felt strength not in her body, but in her will. If he was willing to fight for her, then she too must find a way to fight for him. Suddenly, from the ruins above, a piece of broken stone fell with a loud crash. The soldiers flinched and turned their heads for a split second. Elias moved like lightning, lunging at the nearest one. His knife flashed, striking hard. The soldier cried out, stumbling back. Chaos erupted. Gunfire echoing across the ruins. The widow screamed as Elias was thrown to the ground. He rolled, barely avoiding a shot. He fought like a man with nothing to lose. Every move fueled by pure will, but against 3 soldiers, he could not last. One soldier raised his rifle, aiming directly at Elias's chest. The widow's body shook with terror. She felt powerless. Yet her eyes burned with defiance. She screamed, her voice breaking the air. Stop. Leave him. For a heartbeat, even the soldiers hesitated. Her voice, sharp and full of desperate strength, cut through the battle. Elias used that moment to strike again, slamming his knife into the soldier's leg. The man roared in pain and fell back. The other 2 pulled him away, shouting curses. One spat at the ground. Not worth it. Let them starve together. The soldiers retreated into the ruins. Dragging their injured comrade, the sound of their boots faded. The widow collapsed to her knees, trembling. Elias stumbled back to her side. Blood on his arm, sweat on his brow. He knelt down, breathing hard. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice rough. The widow shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Her words came out broken, but clear. You accused everything again. Why? Elias gave a tired, crooked smile. Because life is worth fighting for. Yours and mine. The widow pressed her hands to her chest. Her heart pounded not with fear this time, but with something stronger, for the first time in so long. She felt alive. A spark of life had returned. A spark that began with one human's choice, and she knew. It would not end here. The ruins had fallen quiet after the soldiers left. The widow sat close to the fire, her thin arms wrapped around herself, still trembling from what had happened beside her. Elias cleaned the blood on his arm with a strip of cloth, his face calm but pale. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the crackle of flames. The widow could not stop staring at him. He had fought 3 armed soldiers with nothing but a small knife. He had risked his life again. For her, someone he had met only yesterday. Her chest tightened with confusion and something deeper. Why did he keep protecting her? "Your arm," she whispered softly. "It needs rest." Elias gave her a faint smile. Though his eyes looked tired, "I've had worse," he muttered, tying the cloth tighter. But the widow could see his hands shake as he worked. He was strong, but he was not unbreakable. Before she could answer, the sound of laughter echoed through the ruins, low, mocking, and cruel. Her blood turned cold. Elias froze, his hand going to his knife again. From the shadows, figures emerge. This time, not 3, but 6. Raiders, armed with crude blades and stolen guns. Their eyes gleamed with hunger and malice. The leader, a tall man with scarred skin and jagged teeth, stepped forward. Well, what do we have here? A human and his little pet widow." The raiders roared with laughter, their voices bouncing off the broken walls. The widow's heart pounded, her breath quickening. She had thought yesterday was bad, but this was worse. Elias stood slowly, placing himself in front of her again. His knife looked small in his hand compared to the raiders' weapons, but his stance was steady, his eyes cold. "You don't want this fight," he said firmly. The leader sneered. "Oh, but we do." He pointed at the widow with his blade. "She's worth nothing. But you still have fight in you. Kill the human, and she'll be carrion by nightfall." The widow's stomach twisted with fear. Her hands gripped the ground as if holding on to life itself. She wanted to scream at them to leave, but her voice was locked in her throat. All she could do was watch as Elias faced them. The raiders rushed forward. Elias dodged the first strike, his knife slashing across one man's arm. The raider howled, stumbling back. But another came from the side, swinging a club. Elias blocked. But the blow sent him staggering. The widow cried out, her body trembling with helplessness. She wanted to stand, to run, to help, but her legs still refused her. Her eyes blurred with tears as she saw Elias fight with every ounce of strength he had. His movements were fast, sharp, but he was only one man against many. The raiders circled him like wolves. Striking from all sides, one blade cut across his shoulder, another grazed his leg. Blood darkened his clothes, yet still he fought, still he stood. Every time he was struck down, he forced himself back up. The widow's chest burned with both terror and awe. No one had ever fought for her like this, not even when her husband was alive. At last, Elias was knocked to the ground. A raider kicked his knife away, sending it spinning across the dirt. The leader raised his weapon high, his mouth twisting into a cruel grin. "End of the road, human." The widow's scream ripped through the night. No. Something inside her broke free in that moment. The weakness, the fear, the hopelessness, all of it shattered. She forced her body forward, crawling to Elias's side. Her hands shook as she grabbed the fallen knife. She had no strength, no training, but her will burned hotter than fire. The leader sneered down at her. "You think you can fight us, widow?" The raiders laughed, but she did not let go. She placed herself in front of Elias, her thin body trembling but unmoving. Her voice cracked, but it was louder than she thought possible. "You will not take him for a moment." The raiders paused. The sight of a starving widow standing in defiance made them hesitate. Elias, bloodied and weak, pushed himself onto his elbows. His eyes widened as he saw her holding the knife. Her breath was ragged, but her gaze was fierce. The leader's grin faded into anger. "Then you die first," he snarled, raising his blade again. But before he could strike, Elias lunged forward with a sudden burst of strength. He grabbed the leader's arm, twisting it hard. The blade fell with a clatter. The widow screamed and slashed with the knife in her shaking hand. Cutting across the raider's side, the man roared in pain, stumbling back. Chaos exploded again. Elias snatched up the fallen blade and swung it wide, forcing the other raiders to retreat. The widow stood close to him, her chest heaving, the knife still shaking in her grip for the first time since she had lost her family. She had fought back. The raiders cursed, pulling their injured leader away. "This isn't over," one spat. Their shadows melted into the ruins, leaving only silence behind. The widow dropped the knife. Her hands trembling, she fell to her knees beside Elias, her tears spilling onto the ash. He was bleeding badly, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her heart pounded with terror. She pressed her hands against his wounds, whispering desperately, "Don't leave me, please. Don't you dare leave me." Elias coughed weakly, his lips curving into a faint smile. "You fought," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Her tears fell harder. "I couldn't let them take you," she cried. He closed his eyes, his breathing shallow but steady. The widow held him close for the first time. She felt not only the spark of life, but also a fire of determination. She would not let him die, not after all he had done for her. Not after he had shown her that even a starving widow was still worth saving. As the night deepened and the fire burned low, she swore to herself that she would protect him, just as he had protected her. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. The ruins were quiet, but the widow's heart raced with fear. Elias lay against the wall, his face pale, his breath slow. Blood stained the cloth around his wounds. Every time his chest rose, she prayed it would not be the last. Her hands shook as she tried to press the torn cloth tighter. But the bleeding did not stop. She looked around the empty street, her throat dry with panic. There was no healer, no medicine. Nothing but ash and broken stones for a long moment. Despair threatened to crush her again. The old voice inside whispered, "You are weak. You can do nothing. He will die because of you." Tears filled her eyes. But she forced herself to push the voice away. No, she thought. She would not let him die. Not this man who had given her food, water, and hope when no one else had. She brushed a strand of hair from Elias's face, her voice trembling. "Stay with me. Please, stay." His eyes opened halfway, cloudy with pain. "You must go," he whispered weakly. "They will come back. You'll be safer without me." Her chest ached at his words. Once, maybe she would have listened. Once, maybe she would have crawled away to hide. But not anymore. She shook her head fiercely. "No, Elias, you saved me. Now it is my turn. I will not leave you." For the first time, she remembered her husband's face. How he once stood in front of her when danger came. How he told her, strength is not in the body alone. Strength is in the heart. Now she understood. She had lost her family once. She would not lose this human too. The widow rose on trembling legs, her body weak but driven by will. She looked around the ruins for anything: plants, herbs, even scraps of cloth. Her people had once used bitter roots to stop bleeding. Maybe, just maybe, something still grew among the wreckage. The night was cold, the wind sharp, but she forced herself forward. Her feet carried her through broken walls and cracked roads. She searched the ground with desperate eyes, and at last, near the edge of a collapsed house, she saw it, a patch of wild herbs, their leaves jagged and dark. Her heart leaped. She remembered her mother using them long ago, pressing them to wounds to draw out poison. With shaking hands, she tore them from the ground and rushed back. Elias still lay slumped, his skin damp with sweat, his breathing shallow. "Hold on," she whispered. Kneeling beside him, she crushed the leaves with a stone, the bitter smell filling the air. Then she pressed the green paste onto his wounds, wrapping them again with strips of cloth. Elias groaned softly, his eyes flickering open for a moment. You know this?" he asked weakly. The widow gave a small, determined nod. "My people taught me long ago." I forgot." Until now, her hands shook, but she tied the cloth tightly. Every knot was a promise she would not let him go. Hours passed, the widow stayed at his side, feeding him sips of water, adjusting the herbs, each time his breathing steadied. Hope grew stronger inside her. She thought of the raiders' cruel words, the way they called her worthless. She thought of the neighbors who walked past her when she lay starving, and she realized something new. She was not weak, she had only been made to believe it. The fire flickered low. The widow leaned against the wall, exhaustion heavy on her body, but she did not close her eyes. She listened to Elias's breathing, steady now, and whispered, "I will not let death take you. Not while I still breathe." Suddenly, a distant howl cut through the night. Her body tensed, not raiders this time, but wild beasts, scavengers drawn to the smell of blood and smoke. Her eyes darted to the shadows. Shapes moved among the ruins. Low and fast, her heart pounded. Elias was too weak to fight. Now it was truly her turn. She picked up the knife he had dropped earlier. The blade felt heavy in her hand, but she gripped it tightly. She stood in front of him, her body shaking, but her feet firm. The shadows grew closer, glowing eyes flashing in the dark. Her throat burned, but she raised her voice. "Come if you dare." The first beast leaped from the shadows. Jaws wide, she screamed and swung with all her strength. The knife cut across its muzzle, and it yelped. Retreating, her chest heaved. Fear crashing through her, but something else filled her too. Fire. She was fighting. She was protecting, not just for herself, but for him. The other beasts circled, snarling. The widow tightened her grip. Her eyes fierce, despite her trembling hands. One step closer, she thought, and I will strike again. The beasts, sensing her defiance, slowly backed into the darkness. Their growls faded, swallowed by the night. The widow sank to her knees, her body weak, but her heart blazing. She turned back to Elias, who was staring at her with half-closed eyes. "You fought them," he whispered hoarsely. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "I had to," she said softly. "I will not lose you." Not after everything. Elias's lips curved into a faint smile before he drifted into sleep. The widow pressed her hand to his. Her decision was made, clear as the stars above. She would protect him, heal him, and walk beside him no matter what came. For once, she was not just surviving. She was fighting for life, his and hers together, and in the ruins. Where once there had been only despair, a new strength was born. The morning sun rose slowly over the broken colony. Its weak light touched the crumbled walls and burned out homes. The widow sat beside Elias, her tired eyes watching every breath he took. The herbs had slowed the bleeding. His skin was still pale, but his chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. For the first time since the attack, she let herself breathe. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her heart carried something new. Strength. She had faced raiders. She had faced beasts, and still she was here. More importantly, he was still alive. She had protected him, just as he had protected her. Elias stirred, groaning softly as his eyes opened. He looked at her, confusion flickering across his tired face. "You didn't leave?" he whispered weakly. The widow shook her head, her thin lips trembling but firm. "Never. I told you, I will not leave you." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then, slowly, a faint smile touched Elias's lips. "You are stronger than you think," he murmured before his eyes closed again. Her chest tightened. The words were simple, but they lit a fire inside her, stronger than she thought. Maybe he was right. She sat back, her hands still resting on his. The bond between them grew quietly, like roots finding the soil. As the day passed, she cared for him. She cleaned his wounds, fed him the little scraps of food she could find. When he was awake, he told her small stories of his past. How he had once been a soldier. How he had seen whole worlds fall into ruin. His voice was heavy with loss, yet steady. And when he grew too weak to speak, she shared her own story. How she had once lived in a small home filled with laughter. How war had taken it all. Leaving her nothing, they were two broken souls, sitting in the ashes of a ruined world, yet together. They felt less broken. Each word, each shared silence, stitched something inside them. Something they both thought was lost forever by nightfall. Elias managed to sit up with her help. The widow supported him, her thin arms surprisingly steady. "You shouldn't push yourself," she said softly. He gave a tired chuckle. "And leave all the work to you." "I can't allow that." Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. It was the first true smile she had felt in a long time. It felt strange on her face, but warm. Elias noticed and raised an eyebrow. "You smiled," he whispered. She touched her lips with surprise, then looked away, embarrassed. "I forgot how," she admitted quietly, that night, as they sat by the fire. The bond deepened. The widow felt it every time Elias's eyes lingered on her. Not with pity, not with disgust, but with respect. She felt it when he reached too steady. Her trembling hand as she prepared more herbs, she felt it in the quiet moments when no words were needed. Somehow, in the ruins of war, trust was being built. Trust stronger than fear. But peace never lasted long. From the shadows, whispers traveled through the ruins. The story of a human fighting raiders to protect an alien widow had spread. Some called it foolish, others called it betrayal. Enemies of both species began to take interest. Some wanted Elias punished for siding with her kind. Others wanted the widow silenced for accepting a human's help. Neither of them knew it yet, but their bond had already become dangerous. The world outside would not forgive it easily. As the days passed, Elias grew stronger. He leaned on her shoulder when they walked, but each step showed his will to heal. The widow gathered food and water from the ruins. Together, they survived. Together. They laughed quietly by the fire. The widow found herself listening for his voice, waiting for his smile. Every day she felt her heart grow lighter. Every day. She felt more alive. But one evening, as they shared a small meal of roots and berries, Elias's expression grew serious. "We can't stay here," he said, his tone low. The widow looked at him, startled. "Why not?" "The ruins keep us hidden." Elias shook his head. "Not hidden." "Enough. The raiders will return. And others will come when they hear of us. Together, we've drawn attention we cannot escape." Her chest tightened with fear. "Then, where do we go?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elias's eyes softened. As he looked at her, somewhere far. Somewhere they won't follow. "But we must move soon, before they find us again." The widow nodded slowly. She felt fear, yes, but also determination. Wherever he went, she would go. Not because she was helpless, but because they belonged together now. Not just as protector and protected, but as two lives bound by choice. That night, as the fire glowed between them, Elias rested his head against the wall and whispered, "When I first saw you, I thought you wouldn't live another hour." The widow lowered her gaze, her throat tight. "And I thought you would leave me to die," she whispered back. He gave a faint laugh. "And yet, here we are." Their eyes met. In that moment, no words were needed. The bond between them was clear. Two strangers, once abandoned, now tied together by survival, trust, and something deeper still. But beyond the ruins, shadows gathered, whispers spread faster than fire, and both friend and enemy forces began searching. Not just for a starving widow or a lone human, but for the impossible bond between them. The ruins could no longer hold them. By dawn, Elias and the widow left the broken colony behind. The road ahead was long, nothing but dust, scattered stones. and the silence of a world that had lost too much. The widow leaned on a stick for balance. Elias leaned on her shoulder. Together, they walked. Each step slow but steady. Days passed, and the bond between them grew stronger with every hardship. When Elias stumbled, the widow supported him. When she grew weary, he encouraged her with quiet words. They were no longer two broken souls, barely surviving. They were two lives carrying each other forward, at night. They rested beneath shattered towers or in caves. The widow gathered roots and herbs. Elias made fires to keep them warm. They shared stories to keep the darkness away, and though danger lurked in every shadow, they found something rare: peace, for the first time in years. The widow laughed softly one night. The sound surprised even her. Elias turned toward her, his lips curving into a smile. "I thought I'd never hear that," he said quietly. She looked away, embarrassed. "I thought I had forgotten how." But inside, her heart glowed with warmth. Yet peace never lasted long. One evening, as the fire crackled low, the sound of boots echoed across the valley. Dozens of figures appeared: raiders, soldiers, mercenaries, all drawn by the same rumor. The story of a human who gave his last meal to an alien widow had spread far. To some, it was foolishness. To others, it was betrayal. But to many, it was a threat. If humans and aliens could bond like this, what else was possible? The widow's heart froze as she saw the torches in the distance. Too many to fight, too many to run from. She turned to Elias, fear shaking her voice. "They've come for us." Elias's jaw tightened, his eyes sharp. "Then we don't hide," he said firmly. The widow looked at him in disbelief. "We cannot fight them all." Elias shook his head. "No, but we can show them something greater." The raiders and soldiers surrounded them, their weapons raised. Shouts echoed in the night. "Traitor!" One cried at Elias. "Shame!" Another spat at the widow. The crowd moved closer, ready to end them both. But Elias stepped forward, his body still weak, but his voice strong. He raised his hands high so all could see. "I had one meal," he shouted, his words carrying through the air. "One. I could have kept it for myself, but I chose to give it to her." He pointed to the widow. Standing tall behind him, she was abandoned by her own kind, left to die in the dirt. But I tell you, now she was worth saving. She is proof that kindness can outlive war. The widow's breath caught in her chest. Her eyes burned with tears as Elias's voice rose higher. "If you kill us, you prove nothing but cruelty. But if you let us live, if you let this bond stand, then maybe there is still hope for all of us." One act of mercy is enough to start a fire that no army can put out. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some shouted angrily. Others fell silent. The widow felt her knees weaken. She could not let him stand alone. She stepped beside him, raising her voice with all her strength. "He saved me when even my own people turned away. He gave me food, water, and life when he had nothing left. You call him a traitor, but I called him family." Her voice broke, but she kept speaking. "I was a widow, starving and forgotten, but because of him, I live. Because of him, I fight. If that is a crime, then I am guilty too." The silence that followed was heavy. The torches flickered, the weapons trembled in uncertain hands. Among the crowd, some lowered their blades, others muttered angrily, torn between hate and doubt. The widow reached for Elias's hand. Their fingers intertwined, strong despite their wounds. She whispered, loud enough for all to hear. "You gave me hope, Elias. Now we give it to them." The moment stretched like an eternity. Then, slowly, one soldier dropped his weapon. Another followed. The sound of metal hitting the ground spread like ripples in water. Not all, but enough. Enough to show that mercy still lived. The raiders cursed and retreated into the darkness. The soldiers who remained stepped back, their eyes lowered. The crowd dissolved, leaving the two of them standing together beneath the stars. The widow leaned against Elias, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, we did it." In that moment, they were no longer just a human and an alien widow. They were proof of something greater, that kindness could survive even in a broken world. That one meal, one choice, could change more than a single life. As the night wind swept across the empty valley, the widow and Elias walked forward together. Hand in hand, they carried no riches, no army, no power. But they carried something stronger, a bond that would outlive war, a legacy born from hunger, mercy, and hope. And in the darkness, where once there had been only despair, now there was light.